In the United States, a civil war has taken over the country. Texas and California have seceded and formed the WF, or Western Forces Militia, while Florida has created its own alliance. A third-term president leads the government forces against the secessionist movements, often appearing on TV to make speeches, swearing victory is close thanks to the defense of the loyalist states. However, nobody believes him, and it's only a matter of time before Washington, D.C. is reached by the WF. War photographer Lee watches the speech from her hotel room in New York and even takes a picture of the TV. Then she notices a bombing occurring in the middle of the city. The next day, Lee and her colleague journalist Joel take a car downtown to cover a protest in which desperate people are begging for water. They're given fluorescent vests before Lee mingles with the crowd to take some pictures. Things soon get violent as the police officers try to push the people back, only for the crowd to retaliate. This doesn't scare Lee, who just keeps taking pictures, but a young photographer named Jessie gets struck in the chaos. Lee immediately drags Jessie away to safety and learns the girl is a fan of her work. As she gives Jessie her vest, she notices an armed woman running into the crowd with an American flag and pushes Jessie down for cover right before a bomb explodes, killing almost all the protesters. For several minutes, Jessie can't hear anything and has to deal with her shock. However, Lee quickly comes out to take pictures of all the bodies. Jessie forces herself to take a picture too, not wanting to be seen as lesser. Later at a hotel where all journalists are staying, Lee and Joel discuss their options with their mentor Sammy while Lee tries to upload her pictures despite the slow Wi-Fi. There are rumors of a big attack on July 4th to make it historically relevant, but they aren't sure if they should believe it. At that moment, the power goes out, which happens often since the war started, and that's why the hotel has a generator ready. After some prodding, Sammy learns the duo will drive through the country's war zones to reach DC, but not to cover the front lines. They want the last interview with the president, who hasn't given an interview in 14 months. In fact, journalists get shot if they approach the White House. Sammy thinks their plan is insane, but knows the best route to reach DC. So Lee guesses he wants to reach DC too. However, Sammy wants to go to the front lines in Charlottesville, Virginia, and needs a ride. At first, Lee and Joel are worried because Sammy is too old to run, but in the end, Lee agrees to bring him. Afterward, Lee tries going to her room on the 10th floor, and the receptionist reminds her that the power comes and goes, so using the elevator could be a risk. At that moment, she's approached by Jessie, who has come to thank her and give her the vest back. Lee tells her to keep it and to get a helmet for the future. Jessie explains she's been a regular photographer so far and is trying to become a war photographer, which is why Lee is her hero. Later in her room, Lee takes a bath to try to relax, but she's haunted by all the atrocities she's seen in the many wars she's covered. There's been a disgusting amount of death, destruction, and torture, and Lee took pictures of all of it while being unable to help those in need. The next morning, the group gets ready to leave, and Lee is shocked to see Jessie in the car. She has an argument with Joel, who calls out Lee's hypocrisy on many points. She's fine with Sammy, who can't run, and all journalists start at that age, including Lee herself. With no arguments left, Lee agrees to bring Jessie, but only if they drop her at Charlottesville with Sammy. The group takes off, and when they leave the city, Sammy reminds Jessie to pay attention. The roads are full of abandoned or broken cars, so they must drive around them. At a checkpoint, soldiers check their journalist IDs before letting them pass. During the trip, Sammy and Joel discuss what kind of questions Joel can ask during the interview, like touching on the subjects of disbanding the FBI and using airstrikes against American citizens. Eventually, they find a gas station guarded by 3 armed guys. They really need the fuel, so they risk stopping. At first, the men don't want to share, but they quickly change their minds when Lee offers to pay extra in Canadian currency. While they fill the tank, Jessie notices something in the distance and goes to check while one of the men follows her. Lee gets worried and follows them as well. To Jessie's disgust, she discovers 2 men hanged by their wrists after being severely tortured. The gunman explains they were looters, and his group has been arguing over what to do with them for days since they're still alive. He gives Jessie the power to choose, but she freezes. To distract the guy, Lee makes him pose with the looters and takes a few pictures. Later, when the group is back on the road, Jessie complains that she didn't take a single photo and wonders if she should have helped. The others explain this is the journalist's life, so she must get used to it because it'll get much worse later. Jessie can't help but cry, but promises to be braver in the future. As the group continues to travel, they hear more empty speeches from the president on the radio and watch the destruction that surrounds them. There are bodies everywhere, but something else catches Lee's attention, and she makes Joel stop the car. Then Lee takes Jessie to a fallen helicopter so she can take some interesting pictures. While doing so, Jessie apologizes for being a burden and explains her old-style camera used to belong to her dad. He's currently hiding on his farm pretending nothing is happening, which bothers her. Jessie wonders if Lee would photograph her if she ever got shot, but Lee lets her reach her own conclusions. In the evening, the group stops to rest. While watching gunfire in the distance, Lee comments on how she used to cover wars as a way to send home some warnings. Yet now, the violence is right there around the corner. Sammy realizes she's losing faith in the power of journalism, and that's why she's being hard on Jessie. Meanwhile, Joel tells Jessie it's normal if she's unable to sleep after what she saw and offers his comfort if she needs it. That night, they sleep outside like campers. The next day, they go to the area with the gunfire they saw last night. Lee and Jessie take tons of pictures as two groups continue to fire at each other with a guy stuck in the middle. A team throws out a smoke grenade to offer some cover, but as soon as the guy tries to run, he gets shot, and his bleeding gets captured on camera. His teammates drag him to safety and try their best to deal with his wound. Unfortunately, the man won't stop bleeding and dies as Jessie takes photos of the whole process. Afterward, the team enters the building, and the journalists follow them. They find a bleeding man asking for help, and he gets shot down. Jessie can't help staring as the team finishes searching the building. By the end, Joel is laughing with a fighter, as if it was a normal work day. The soldiers capture a few enemies and take them out for execution, which Jessie takes pictures of too. Sometime later, the journalists arrive at a refugee camp. All tents are full, so they'll still have to sleep in their car. While Jessie develops her pictures the old way, she continues to bond with Lee, who explains her parents are also on a farm pretending nothing is going on. When Jessie finally takes a look at her pictures, she's disappointed that they don't look good. But Lee reminds her this is normal. Only one of every 30 photos will be worthy. Jessie eventually finds an excellent picture of the dying man, and Lee compliments her work. That night, the group is able to relax with other refugees before returning to the horrors in the morning. Their journey continues as the journalists watch the never-ending death and destruction by the roads. Jessie takes more pictures, putting the faces of her friends in the shots for extra impact. Eventually, they reach a town that looks perfectly normal, with people hanging out on the streets and peace all around. They stop by a clothing store and ask the clerk what's going on. So the clerk explains her town has chosen to just ignore the war. Jessie convinces Lee to try on a dress, pointing out that being at war doesn't mean she can't have nice things. She teases her looks and takes a picture of Lee's smile, because it's the first time she sees it. Afterward, Lee goes back to Sammy, who points out there are armed men on the roofs. He also says this life wouldn't have suited them because it's boring. Sometime later, the group finds an abandoned circus with a dead man in the middle of the road. Lee checks the area with her camera zoom but doesn't see anyone. Joel decides to move forward, but as soon as they cross the entrance arch, their window gets shot. Panicking, Joel speeds up and runs over the body until he finds a safe spot near a truck to stop. There they find two camouflaged soldiers who are waiting for the shooter in the house to reveal themselves. As the journalists move around to cover this incident, the shooter fires at them and fails. Jessie and Lee take pictures while Joel tries interviewing the soldiers, wanting to know whose side they and the shooter are with. However, the soldiers don't belong to any team. They're just two guys trying to kill a person that wants to kill them in return. After some waiting, the soldiers finally bring down the shooter, and the journalists approach the body for more pictures. At that moment, a second shooter appears and kills the soldiers, sending the group running away in their car. Finally, they reach Charlottesville, where they say goodbye to Sammy and Jessie. Jessie is thankful for the experience and promises to become a great war photographer. Before they part ways, Lee gives her advice on things like getting shot at least once to gain some extra respect, and that if she ever starts feeling numb, it'll be time to quit. As Jessie watches Lee and Joel drive away, she puts on her helmet and goes to join Sammy in town. Meanwhile, Lee and Joel drive through a forest area, where they find a huge tree blocking the road. Lee takes this as a bad omen and mentions that going back is always an option, but Joel insists on continuing. They find some roads through the trees and get out of the forest. Finally, they reach the capital. The WF reaches Washington, D.C., and the soldiers break through the White House, where the president is currently watching a news story that details his many crimes. Jessie has joined the WF in the attack and follows them as they open the Oval Office. The president's assistant tries to protect him and gets shot down, and the president himself gets shot a moment later. The soldiers' commander wants the president alive to see him executed on live TV, but it's too late for that now. The commander lets Jessie approach the bodies, and she takes her first pictures of the scene while thinking of Lee. At that moment, Lee and Joel arrive, and Lee gives Jessie a proud look. As Jessie takes more pictures, Joel writes his Lee watches the chaos with a mix of emotions, realizing that this is the end of their journey. They have witnessed the culmination of the war, the fall of the president, and the triumph of the people. Despite the loss and the pain, there's a sense of relief that it's finally over. Video is over. Subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and become part of a community. Subscribe now, leave a like, leave a comment, and indicate which film you would like the recap of.